If you cannot see anything, do not take your eyes off the image. The real should be in your visual apparatus. Effect.
Imaginary friends are regarded as a wholly normal phase in the development of a child's psyche. In fact, it is even beneficial for fostering creativity in children.
A national alert appears on the screen. The government then gives several orders for its citizens to follow. Cancel any public funerals, remove all mannequins from commercial stores, burn any photograph that includes human beings, remove all mirrors from homes, buildings, hospitals, commercial establishments, etc. Every person must carry a visible documentation of identification at all times, including both outside and inside the home. We are then introduced to somebody named Dr. Andrew Becker. We have been monitoring an entity for the past 2 months. We have enclosed it in a 4-meter thick concrete container and monitoring it with an internal camera. The entity appears to be motionless, although we have found it in 2 different positions when not under observation. This is extremely bizarre, but despite lacking facial features, it seems to interact with the camera. We are then shown the faceless entity. It appears to be some sort of mannequin in a pitch black room. We are then shown the same entity again, but from a photo taken in different light spectrums, revealing a strange face on the mannequin. This transformation would last 106 hours. The entity remains always silent. However, some laboratory workers reported feeling that the figure spoke to them directly through the screens. HR and SD, the 2 permanent camera monitors, had to be hospitalized in critical condition after 3 weeks. A strange infection and enormous tumors spread rapidly across their faces. We are then shown the current conditions of HR and SD. We are taken to what seems to be a mini documentary on Jacques Lacan, the renowned French psychiatrist. In the documentary, they discuss Lacan's most famous theory, the real. Now, the real is something that is quite complex and difficult to understand, but it can be thought of as a whole other level of existence that goes beyond our ordinary understanding of our own dimension. Only being able to access it indirectly through traumatic encounters would be impossible, wherein existence is shaped by parameters that defy our understanding. With humans in their infinite interest to go beyond themselves, they could accidentally create a catastrophic breach if they attempted to access the real. You see, in the real, there is no identity, no figures, only horror and uncertainty. We are then shown 5 pictures from inside some houses, with the most haunting photo being of an unknown creature standing in the corner of a room, and this picture. The everyday reality. The everyday reality is just simply referring to the natural world around us and everything that surrounds us without interference. Tape 2. What is the real? Jacques Lacan's concept of the real does not simply refer to the physical or material aspects of the world, but a dimension of experience that is inaccessible and very disturbing. The real can't be captured by language or the mental representations we use. Our everyday reality is shaped by the words and symbols we use to describe it. The way we use symbols shapes how we see reality, influenced by our own beliefs, biases, and individual fantasies. On the other side of things, the real intrudes into our lives in a way that confronts us, leading to a lack of connection between our representations and our direct experiences. In other words, the real seems to throw reality out the window. The framework of existence itself is changed for you. The real manifests through the unexplainable, unthinkable, and the traumatic. It's a disruptive force that messes with our illusion of life. What then exists in the real? In this tape, we learn that the real can be perceived through the human senses and manifest through concrete objects. But this isn't just merely a way of being processed by the human mind. For example, the pigeon. Yes, it looks like a pigeon, and it could be a pigeon, but it could also be the real. You see, the real plays with your mind and innate human senses as it manifests in objects, and each individual person may see similar or widely different things. The real might look like a pigeon, but could also be anything else in the everyday reality affected by the real. That also goes for all the objects on the screen. At the end of this tape, we learn a couple of things. First, we understand that the real will primarily manifest in the human mind as organic entities, and we also learn the reasoning behind why the government is strictly enforcing people to have identification documentation on them at all times, as the real can be manifested as a human being, taking on one's form, but by enforcing identification as heavily as they are, it brings the probability of encountering the real down by 28%. The real testing. We are about to experience a test that should only be undergone by authorized and properly trained personnel. What we will be seeing in particular is a photograph of an entity phenomenon, which has been concluded with 89% certainty to be a real. The photograph was taken after an explosion at an Ohio plastic factory, which occurred in 1978. Personnel that will view the upcoming photos are advised to listen to the following rules. Failure to comply with these rules will lead to your capture and permanent quarantine at a study center facility. The real seems to be stronger under certain circumstances. Like, observing it between 5 p.m. and 11 can cause a 70% occurrence of unpredictable effects. Having the company of another human being can have detrimental effects, as the real could transform into a doppelganger, completely taking on the form of another human. And if you suffer from any mental illnesses, in specific schizophrenia and major depression, you have a 45% chance to suffer from a panic crisis or a paranoid crisis compared to other mental illnesses. We are then shown the following image of a mirror, and inside the mirror there seems to be a reflection of a chair. But the thing is, not everyone who witnessed this image sees the chair. 35% of people claim to have seen nothing. 21% of people claim to have seen a chair. 18% of people claim to have heard voices inside of their head. 10% of people claim to have seen nothing behind the mirror, but they felt tremendous terror. 9% of people claim to have seen something like this drawing, and 7% of people were never seen again. The white mannequin. In 1988, workers of a clothing store called Salvatore Boutique in Toronto would report for several weeks on a series of mannequins found in different positions of the store, places they weren't supposed to be. The following 3 images I'm about to show you were taken from that store's security cameras. A few weeks after these strange series of events, 2 employees and 1 passerby would die inside of the store on June 10th, 1988. And footage of their death would be captured by the store's security cameras. Multiple mannequins would form strange arms and fatally attack the 2 employees and a man who was passing by. The police department would strictly prohibit the release of this audio and video material. For 3 weeks after this incident, no strange activities were reported on the mannequins until this photo. This image would force the permanent closure of the clothing store, and 6 months later, the American Security Department would request the intervention of the Canadian government for the study of these mannequins. The team of the Department of Anomalous Reality Investigation Cases would select 2 of their best doctors, Dr. and I'm probably gonna butcher this, Raj Venkat Warren? And Dr. James Arnold to study these creatures. The mannequins were kept in a specially contained laboratory 1 kilometer deep for several days to be examined. Now, the results of the examinations were odd, as what was recorded and what was reported by the examiners were 2 different things. In these images, you can see that the mannequins have muscular tissue and a nervous system similar to humans, but during the examination, they would report no such thing. Examiners said that the mannequins were simply made up of normal wood and metal like any other mannequin. Now, due to these unexpected findings, the department would extensively study the nature of these creatures. This tape was a lot, as we are getting to see how the real can affect objects even without being able to see the mutations with the naked eye. We get to see how the symbolic representations of objects, in this case a mannequin, can be completely changed by the real. The real is extremely unpredictable in the ways it can affect you. If you are unlucky like the 3 individuals in the store, then it seems like it can manifest in a way to kill you. But under the right conditions, it can be somewhat controlled, at least in these laboratory conditions. But even under the right conditions, it cannot be fully contained, as shown with these images. The interview. We are presented with excerpts from a transcript of interviews conducted with 3 prisoners sentenced to life imprisonment. Their names are Wilder, Sterling, and Peter. Peter will be the one to give us the most relevant testimony.
I don't know, man. I've told you like 4 times already.
I saw that damn thing move on the table during lunchtime. What the hell did you expect me to do? I know nobody gives a damn about my life or anyone else's in this goddamn world, but nobody wants to die like that. That thing could have attacked me. No, it wasn't just a damn chair. What the hell are you telling me? I saw how he tried to escape. It even told me the plan. I'm not stupid enough to fall for that crap, especially after seeing what you guys did to him in the cell with those black hooded men. No? Then who else could it be? He didn't die, are you crazy? I saw him this morning. You think I'm a liar? What more do you need from a snitch? There were 4 of us. You already know the names. The idiot was munching on a piece of human intestines, and nobody said a damn thing. I don't know where he got it from. I don't think he killed anyone. I don't think he's one of those, what do you call them? Oh yeah, cannibals? No, he wasn't eating an apple, man. I'm telling you. He had a piece of meat in his hand. I wasn't about to start a fight over such stupidity. You guys have surveillance cameras. I know what. I saw the other idiots must have conspired to get me locked up in isolation. The exact reasoning given for these interviews isn't directly stated, but it seems like some sort of fight broke out, and we could assume that the prisoners must have been under the effects of the real, as they all seem to have a different perspective on whatever they witnessed. Now, the last image given to us in this tape is of a headless mannequin in what seems to be a prison cell. In fact, I believe it might be Peter's cell, as he mentioned the others possibly trying to get him locked up in isolation. The chosen one for the clinical trials. We are shown several people and given the same basic information for each person. Their name only given to us by their initials, their age, status, either married, divorced, or single, their occupation, and their medical history. These are the people chosen for the clinical trials. The only person that seems out of the norm is RY. His eyes appear almost all black, and the color in his face is extremely out of the norm, as the color on his face kind of looks like a purple aurora. His only medical history listed is acid reflux, and that wouldn't really affect your appearance. So there's only one question left to ask. Is he infected by the real? The 4 modes of jouissance, the prime mover of the real. Now, throughout the video so far, I have only been able to briefly explain what the real is, but in this tape, we are able to dig a little bit deeper into the concept behind the real. The real is a concept that cannot be fully understood by definition alone. You need to understand each part of the concept, as the definition alone does not make sense. The late Jacques Lacan's concept of the real is divided into 4 modes of action that ranges from human communication, meaning speaking or writing, to semblances of reality, or in other words, the way something appears on the surface level. Each part of the concept builds on one another, so think of it kind of like a system. Imaginary jouissance. Jouissance is a French term meaning to derive pleasure from pain. In this case, jouissance is how the real enjoys the bodies of reality. Imaginary jouissance could be thought of as an obstacle getting in your way of perceiving the everyday reality. It refers to how people communicate something. Take this apple for example. It is no longer an apple. It will be called something else. This is due to the real affecting the way someone views an object, literally making it something else in their eyes. It alters the linguistic representation of an object, the signification of jouissance. It's quite similar to imaginary jouissance, but it affects the literal symbolic representation of an object, essentially rewriting reality itself. For example, this apple starts to take on a form that is not natural to itself. As seen by the example, the apple starts to take on organic materials like the muscle tissues and bones. Impossible jouissance. The idea behind this part of the concept is essentially an idea that your mind is being repressed of its defenses due to the lack of connection between the original symbol and the real, leaving people susceptible to opening up a breach in the everyday reality, and with that brings violence and physical or psychic destruction, as the real emerges after trauma. The fragmented jouissance. Fragmented jouissance can be thought of as individually and collectively people purposefully opening up a void in the everyday reality, as they are driven by their own personal and instinctual desires and group desires. The real will then enter through that void or hole in the object. In 1990 in Spokane, Washington State, multiple security cameras that were set up in wooded areas to protect animals one night noticed that some nocturnal creatures would disappear. The suspicion would fall on 2 men camping and having a bonfire in the protected areas of the park. Security personnel would be sent out to patrol the area after hearing loud sounds of explosions and screams being heard. No evidence was found for the explosions heard or the 2 men camping, until the cameras would capture rabbits that seemed to be injured. The personnel would then re-explore the park and nearby areas of the city, and that's where the following images were discovered through body cameras. The commercial is recruiting individuals to record and study strange phenomenon that the mental health science were investigating outside of the public knowledge. They are kind of bribing people into the commercial, saying that they will live a successful life, have a successful marriage, get $10,000, and so on and so forth. Little did these people know, 40 years after submitting their applications, them as well as their children and grandchildren will become part of the clinical trial program. The reasoning behind this program was to obtain empirical evidence of the real. In 1991, 11 American citizens were chosen to be exposed to objects that had a high probability of being corrupted by the real. These individuals were isolated in heavily shielded rooms within the experimentation area. Now, the objectives for the trial were 3 things. 1, to study the interaction of objects with the human mind. 2, to study the physical implications of contact with the real. And 3, to study the potential breaches that open up in the everyday reality when the real is disturbed. We will now witness the way the real affects all these subjects, with the following images being taken by surveillance cameras that were placed inside of each containment cell. Subject AA, Isolation Cell 1. He was ordered to stand for 3 hours next to a mannequin, and nothing happened to him. Subject GRA, Isolation Cell 2. She was ordered to sit for 6 hours in front of a porcelain statue of a goose, and nothing happened to her. Subject HD, Isolation Cell 3. She was ordered to sit for 5 hours in front of a mannequin, and after 4 hours, the mannequin began to take on the subject's form, and then the woman began to fade away. Subject HF, Isolation Cell 4. HF became overwhelmed by panic and attempted to escape from the isolation cell due to experiencing excruciating pain in his back. After an hour, he eventually melted into a black substance. Subject JR, Isolation Cell 5. She was ordered to brush her teeth with a charred complex. She was instructed to show the state of her teeth every 5 minutes, and eventually she'd be unable to stand after her face started to be eroded by the toothpaste. Subject KR, Isolation Cell 6. He was ordered to sit next to a mannequin for 6 hours and nothing would happen to him, but the mannequin did adopt a similar posture to KR. Subject LD, Isolation Cell 7. As soon as he sat down, the subject turned into a statue. Subject NW, Isolation Cell 8. Ordered to sit for 3 hours in front of a porcelain statue of a goose, nothing would happen to him. Subject OA, Isolation Cell 9. She was ordered to sit in front of a wooden cube and interact with it for an indefinite period of time. She had claimed that worms started coming out of the cube and filled the room, but images did not show anything as she described. Subject RY, Isolation Cell 10. He was ordered to sit on the floor and place a bag over his head for 2 hours. The man would only report of dizziness and a slight headache. Subject ZT, Isolation Cell 11. He was ordered to sit on the floor and place a bag over his head for 5 hours. He did not survive, and the cause of his death appeared to be a cardiopulmonary arrest. The surviving subjects would be taken to the annihilation chamber, where they would be exposed to the strangest object of the real ever studied, the annihilation chamber itself. 2 hours after the test in cells 3, 4, 5, 8, and 10, unidentifiable individuals and entities would appear on the camera. Their nature is unknown, but they were likely an effect of the real.
The head of the Department of Anomalous Reality Investigation Cases, Dr. Alexander Simlar, presents a new reality anomaly that could potentially constitute another instance of the real. This study commenced with isolated reports in the state of Texas from child psychologists, who, as is customary, find themselves dealing with cases of night terrors, phobias, school adaptation, among others. In the realm of psychology, imaginary friends are regarded as a wholly normal phase in the development of a child's psyche. In fact, it is even beneficial for fostering creativity that children invent beings in their imagination. The descriptions and drawings they create of these unreal entities are sometimes vague, but at other times, exceedingly realistic.
Sometimes I catch her talking to herself in the backyard, near a large dollhouse we gifted her. She mentions that she always has someone to talk about with Anomaly. The psychologist assured me there's nothing wrong with that. She'll outgrow it with time. We are then shown a picture of Delphine's drawing, which depicts her imaginary friend to the left, Anomaly, and to the right, Delphine. It's almost as if Anomaly is taking on the appearance of Delphine. Throughout the year 1994, many psychologists, neurologists, and psychiatrists across Texas would begin to receive a significant influx of patients, all children. They had various of cases with symptoms and pathologies related to nighttime activities in children. Some of the main characteristics were uncontrollable crying at night, accounts of monsters attacking while they were sleeping, sleep paralysis, and bizarre depictions of imaginary friends. Initially, these cases didn't cause too much alarm. That was until the cases started dramatically multiplying throughout the entire state, exhibiting certain commonalities that, according to the scientific perspective, were entirely inexplainable. Between February and November of 1994, only 15 cases with similar or identical descriptions of a certain imaginary friend had been recorded. But by December of 1994 and January 1995, this number would skyrocket to 439. We then get descriptions of the imaginary friend from several children. They all describe similar characteristics. Here are all the descriptions of the imaginary friends given by the children. A tall, dark-colored entity, texture resembling a garbage bag, bright red eyes, lacking hands, emitting a terrifying and highly unusual noise, desperately attempting to enter through the windows. None of the parents could see it, and the entity appears to be named Rupo. Some of the parents of these children took pictures where the children said Rupo would appear, but these pictures didn't reveal anything more than just trash bags. Due to the spike of the depictions of the same imaginary friends, in April of 1995, the Fort Worth Neuroimaging Center would select a group of children for examination. The examination results would be extremely concerning and were absolutely unexplainable. A pattern would emerge among the children as something seemed to be impacting the optical lobe and adjacent brain regions. The optical lobe is responsible for all your visual perception, like form, motion, and color. The regions impacted had heightened general cerebral activity, the levels of which surpassed activity associated with epileptic episodes. The children would remain completely conscious and aware during these testings. Despite having more general cerebral activity than someone experiencing an epileptic episode, this was completely unheard of in medical practice, as these results suggested conditions that defied known parameters of life sustenance. Along with that issue, they would also find some more disturbing changes, such as huge tumor masses with malformations, biological entities growing within their cranial cavities, and the children's hallucination brain activity being dangerously higher than normal when Rupo is remembered. It's as if Rupo is infecting their minds and quite literally growing within them, changing their perception of reality and feeding off of them. After seeing the severity of these cases, the Department of Anomalous Reality Investigation cases would take action into their own hands, putting multiple houses in major cities of Texas under strict control. Various investigation groups would stay in each of these houses for a month to attempt to get analog or digital evidence of the entity Rupo. The scientists would prepare the interiors of the house by equipping them with cameras and sensors. They would experiment with multiple different scenarios involving both video and audio devices, with the presence of people or empty houses. And on several occasions, the presence of the children was actually requested during the start of recordings of the windows. The results from these tests were nothing less than astonishing. They would capture photographic proof of Rupo, but physically capturing the creature was impossible, as the creature could only be seen through cameras, unlike the children who could see it with the naked eye. They would also record phonographic recordings of the noise emitted by Rupo. The noise would be confirmed by the children after hearing it on the computer, and the spectral analysis of the audio would be studied by engineers, and they would determine that the tape had recorded a sound coming from outside of the house. And after both of these pieces of evidence were collected, Rupo would never be seen again, and the children who received cerebral alterations would be permanently placed under medical supervision of the department led by Dr. Alexander Simard, as they would await for the children's evolution. In 1980, Jacques Lacan, at the age of 80, would be invited to attend the Freudian Field Foundation's annual Congress in July, 1 year before his death. At this event, Lacan would deliver his final speech on the theory of the real. This event would put a close to further research into the real. Lacan's final inaugural speech would mark the start of 4 days, most with a full audience, where each speaker had the ear of the renowned psychologist. During this event, they would attempt to answer the last major questions surrounding the concept of the real. The outcome of this event would even leave Jacques Lacan stunned. In 1997, members of the Freudian Field Foundation would explore an area in the Brazilian Amazon that had only been studied by indigenous groups, and they would find something absolutely inexplainable. This place was known as Pedrito Dunini's Sanctuary, relating to a deity of the underworld and Afro-Brazilian religions. The sanctuary was a pond filled with black waters that seemed to be bubbling. A large amount of exotic animals would disappear into this water, never to re-emerge again. The indigenous people mentioned some weird things happening in this pond. Something so weird that not even the members leading this group could explain it. They would call it transmutation. The Foundation members would take several samples from the pond, believing it was a possible manifestation of the real. They would wait until the following year, in 1980, to present it explicitly to Lacan at the closing of the conference. On July 15th, during the last session of the conference, Mathis de Souza Brockner's team, the members that originally took the samples, would bring a large metal box into the main hall, and inside it would contain samples from the black water in the Amazon. Lacan was invited to take a look at these samples, but when opened, Lacan would mention some sort of life form that seemed to grow inside of the box. But when another member observed the samples, they would mention something completely different. From their observation, the water was turning silver and had small pebbles that seemed to float. Lacan examined the samples for about 30 minutes before his final speech. Lacan's final speech transcription would be held in the possession of the French group Sterfella for several years, as Lacan himself would grant the transcription rights to that foundation. Jacques Alan Miller was responsible for compiling Lacan's work. Miller considered including the final transcription in the printed seminars, but despite his decision, the foundation did not agree to grant the rights.
In the same way I mentioned in my inaugural speech, that 80 years of my life have passed for me to come to Latin America, especially here in Venezuela, to share my latest findings with my most loyal, but hitherto unknown students has been a momentous experience. This is not the closing speech I had originally planned, because after the memorable and highly significant presentation by Dr. Matthias de Souza Bruckner, I am truly astonished. It is necessary to make a turn in my final presentation. You, who are here, have clearly witnessed that my research work on what I have termed the register of the real has been, even for myself, a shocking reality, to use a redundancy. The Mobius position of the phenomenon that Dr. Souza Bruckner has exposed encapsulates the most significant of my topological propositions, which, as you already know, have marked the final shift in my classes. I have been brought here, from the depths of the wildest Brazil, a substance that Dr. Diana Rabinovich had already proposed certain conjectures about in terms of the characteristics of Euler-Poincaré surfaces. However, I must say that here we are in the presence of what I have called an intricacy of jouissance of a Riemann surface. Let us see how this object, apparently so simple, liquid, and obscure, is capable of eliciting the most varied experiences when symbolically apprehended in what I call the register of the imaginary, from the alienated image to the perforated discourse of the social, as crossed by the first signifier within the toric figure. I have noticed that, just as I have seen it, here is a figure with a pair of eyes. However, some have attested in this very container silver and gold gemstones. A couple of students have disagreed with my word and yours, arguing that what they have seen on this stage are nothing more than books with red covers. This is precisely what I have theorized throughout my life. The real. It is that plane of Mobius surfaces that can access this symbolic plane outside of the same sociocultural symbol. At my age and with my health condition, my intellect will not allow me to advance in the delineations of this topological phenomenon. I have left the progress of my theory in capable hands. Thank you very much for your dedication to this Congress dedicated to the discussion of my work. Be diligent in your investigations. I will declare not only this grand event, but also my own school devoted to the register of the real closed.